also today. So without further ado, I'm going to ask that we get started. And council member, if you would be so kind as to join us at the podium.
Will.
All right.
Thank you so much, Director Shreve. Thank you to OTA for convening this, and to our residents and others just for being here. And to Director Shreve's point, I also think it's important that folks, when you come somewhere, you leave with information that is beneficial to you to understand where the city is, where the city's going, talk to you about some things that I'm doing, and have an opportunity to get feedback and answer questions. So I want to start with a little bit of context, historical context that I'll be very brief about. And as I do that, I want to recognize, acknowledge, and for those of you who haven't met them, introduce my committee director and legislative director, Jay Bly.
Hello.
And my legislative assistant, Kate Conquest. When Director Shreve says that I treated the agency well, what she's really saying is that my bosses treated them well and told me this is what we're doing, council member. But we have a history of investing in OTA, not just because we like the agency, but because I believe that the most impactful investments are the ones that pay dividends later. And so doing oversight hearings with the Office of the Tenant Advocate and with public witnesses over the years, what we continue to see is people who have utilized the agency, and the agency continuing to support people in a vital area, which is remaining housed. And frankly, a lot of people have questions and concerns about their housing that they don't have the private lawyers or expertise. And we have this agency that is that base of expertise. So in fiscal year 26, the budget recommendation we voted on yesterday, there was a 0.4% increase from fiscal year 2025. That sounds very small, but for context, almost every agency is getting cut right now for understandable reasons. We are in our first budget deficit in 30 years. And so we can't do the same things this year that we were able to do last year. We were able to, in fiscal year 25, secure an additional attorney position for OTA, which is going to get filled when the hiring freeze is lifted. We have supported expanded office space, other attorney, non-attorney personnel for OTA over the years. And I always see those as good investments, because everybody who works at OTA is serving residents. And that's what I continue to see and hear. We also passed in May, so last month, the Fairness and Stability in Housing Amendment Act of 2024. Well, it took effect last month. And it does a couple things with respect to rent control. One, it abolishes certificates of assurance for rent controlled housing. So there was a law passed in 1985 that said the city would have to pay a ton of money if the city implemented expanded rent control. Well, we don't have that kind of money, and we may need to at some point expand rent control. So we had to essentially dissolve that law. We also made some changes to voluntary agreements. We modified the law in rent controlled housing in two ways. We repealed the automatic approval of voluntary agreements, where all rents are to be adjusted by the same percentage. And we placed reasonableness limits on voluntary agreements statutory purpose, which is to establish the rent charge. Really excited in the past few weeks that we finally got the rent registry database up and running. This is something that's been going on for almost a decade. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of fits and stops. But for us to understand how much rent controlled housing and eventually how much affordable housing is in the district, that's a question we should be able to answer. If we can't, then it's hard for us to make informed policy decisions. So we will soon have the answer to the number of rent controlled housing units in the city. And after that, we will start to have a grasp on the number of affordable housing units in the city. Now, let me say one note on that I'm going to come back to later, because it's really important. In 2000, DC had about 70,600 low-cost rentals. And since 2000, it's been cut almost in half to 34,500. So since the year 2000, we've lost about half of our affordable rentals. So I'm starting to really push the city to focus on housing preservation, not just what is more sexy, which is production, right? When you build a new building and you use tax dollars, you got all the elected officials, they got the balloons, and you cut ribbons, and you do the groundbreaking. Well, that stuff is nice and it looks good in pictures, but when we are losing housing more quickly than we are building it, then we are displacing people. Like people live, if people live there, they are Washingtonians. When that building ceases to exist, we have pushed out the Washingtonian. And that's something my family knows a lot about. So rather than being driven by sort of what's sexy, what gets the headlines, we have to be driven by what's best for the city. So one of the things that I'm probably going to catch some heat for this, that we did in our budget recommendation that we voted on yesterday, the Housing Production Trust Fund, which funds most of our affordable housing efforts. For most of the years this has been in effect, it has focused almost exclusively on new production, even though it is for production and preservation. So we are requiring that at least 30% of the Housing Production Trust Fund dollars go toward preservation, because I want to keep you in your units, and I want to do that in a way that keeps rents low. So when we can help landlords make condition repairs to buildings with an agreement that they are not going to raise or substantially raise rents, that means you get to continue to live in dignified buildings. That means the vast majority of our buildings, 78% of our buildings, were built roughly 50 or more years ago, before 1978. And so we've got to be investing in these buildings because it's not enough to build new affordable housing. We've got to keep the places that people are living in good conditions. We are taking on some unfair billing practices. Councilmember Allen introduced the Fair Housing Practices Amendment Act that would prohibit landlords from charging tenants for utilities accrued in common areas. We've seen an uptick in landlords charging excessive fees that most of us just can't budget for. So, what are the utilities going to be in the common area? First of all, we don't know. And so you may get these wild swings in utilities month to month. That's going to have an impact on your pocketbooks. But also, we can't change the rules in the middle of the game in a way that hurts residents. And something that was really eye-opening for me, my team and I were at landlord tenant court earlier this week, and there were a number of cases that came up that had only to do with utility fees, not rent owed. And so this is a place that I'm really glad we're going to be continuing to work with the chief tenant advocate and her team. We did some work around pet fees last year, but this is a place that we have to continue to focus. Now, something that's coming up that I'm going to take some heat on, and I'm okay with that, is the Rental Act. So the data I'm looking at, because my job is to be underneath the hood and seeing what's happening and how it's going to affect people. The data I'm looking at show that we had a massive, almost 75% drop in the production of apartment buildings over the past 2 years. Well, our population is growing. If the population is growing, but the housing stock is not growing, that means rent is going to get more expensive. So I say we have a problem. We've got to figure out how to solve that problem. I have to figure out how to get housing production going again. So I spent a couple months meeting with tenants, advocates, landlords, for-profit developers, nonprofit developers, and investors. And the number one issue that came up by a very large margin was a law that many of us are familiar with called TOPA. Now, TOPA is this third rail issue. Long before I got to the council and long before most of the people who are yelling at me got into this space, it was a third rail. And everybody said, don't touch TOPA, you can't touch TOPA. Well, I come from a family that's been displaced. And if I think I have to touch TOPA in order to prevent more displacement, I'm going to touch it. I don't want to because I'm gonna take a lot of lumps for it. But what I found in talking to these folks is I'm learning as I go. The people who invest to build a building are not the same as the people who invest to own a building, right? So if I want to build a new building, I got to go to y'all and say, hey, I need you to invest in helping me build this building. Once the building is built, we're going to sell it to an owner or a set of owners, right? So when I ask you to invest, you are not planning to be a landlord. You're planning to be an investor. You want to get your money back. You also have other options as to where you can put your money. When you buy a building that's already occupied, you are investing in owning a building. So what I was finding was folks were no longer investing in DC for a number of reasons, but overarching was TOPA. But it wasn't just TOPA as a law like forever. It was in those early years, the early investors who don't plan to own a building need some predictability in when they can get their money out. And so then we went and looked at the data, and the data showed that fewer than somewhere between 0 and 4% of tenant associations that are formed to exercise TOPA rights happen in the first 15 years. So I say, well, this is really good news. We can amend TOPA in a way that's going to reattract investment into apartment buildings in a way that doesn't touch the way TOPA is used in almost any cases. But politically, I'm still touching TOPA. So a lot of people are going to be running around the city saying how Robert White doesn't care about tenants and we're taking away tenant laws. And I'm running around the city saying, I was here the last time the city was in a deficit. I'm going to be here through this deficit. And I saw that a lot of folks like my family didn't make it through the last one. So if we don't do something to get investment in multifamily housing, whether I like the answer or not, the people who are going to suffer the consequences are the people who are already unable to afford to live here or barely hanging on. And that's a trade-off I'm just not going to make. So I'm still working with folks and listening to see how we might improve it, but we've got to do what we've got to do. And I just tell folks, look, I've taken lumps before for the right reason. I'm going to take them again for the right reason, but I'm going to fight for the people and the issues that I believe in, even if it's not popular. So y'all going to hear people bad-mouthing me, but I know where my heart is, and I know I'm trying to do the right thing. And so, between now and when we move this bill, I'll continue to look for more information and data, but I am going to do what I need to do to keep rents low.
I'm sorry, I apologize. What's TOPA?
TOPA, thank you. It is the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. Thank you for asking that. This is a law that was passed, I think in the 70s, that allows residents. This is a time where a lot of buildings were converting to condos, and that was resulting in displacement of a lot of residents. So really profound idea, really important program that allows tenants in a building to organize and purchase their own building. That's amazing. It prevents displacement. It doesn't sort of create more affordable housing, because if those become condos, then it's not more affordable housing, but you have helped these folks not become displaced. Over the years, it is adapted in a number of ways to allow tenants a seat at the table in their buildings, which is also important, right? Like if I own a building and you all live there, then you don't want me to sell the building to some slumlord with a bad reputation, right? So we want to make sure we have tenants that have a seat at the table. But it has kind of grown and adjusted in some various ways over the years. And when TOPA is not used very much anymore for residents to buy buildings, because the larger buildings cost a lot of money. And so, tenants often aren't able to find that amount of money, but they have used TOPA successfully to improve conditions of the building. I don't want to get too far into policy. We shouldn't have to utilize TOPA in order to improve conditions of the building. Like we have a Department of Buildings that's supposed to enforce these things, but it is used in that way. But tenants in a brand new building generally are not exercising TOPA rights. Like in the first 15 years, building's still new. So that's why we don't see TOPA exercise in those early years. So the mayor introduced what's called the Rental Act, and she wanted a 25-year exemption on TOPA with some caveats that were really hard for people to understand. But I am proposing just a clean 15-year TOPA exemption. So if you sell the building within the first 15 years, or after a substantial rehabilitation, which we will define in code. So like not just kind of touching things up here and there, but like really like reconstituting the building, then you will be exempt from TOPA so that we can draw in that investment. So we're not going to do what the mayor wants to do, which is 25 years, because that actually, I believe the chief tenant advocate, the word she used at the hearing would be the TOPA funeral or something of that sense. But I agree. I think exempting TOPA for 25 years gets into a different lane. That is more aligned with getting rid of TOPA, which I have no interest in doing. The mayor also wanted to decrease the number of days to evict someone. And we are not going to go along with that because when you are, there are good reasons sometimes that landlords want to evict people, but you want that person to have a fair defense. So if you evict them in 10 days, if you give the courts the authority to evict them in 10 days, a lot of us haven't found legal representation or gotten our bearings together. And so we don't agree with that. And we're going to strike that. We are, I don't remember where all my notes are. Oh, there. The mayor wanted to allow evictions, public safety evictions. Look, everybody has the right to be safe and feel safe in their buildings. But the mayor wanted to allow public safety evictions for someone just being arrested. That bar is too low. I heard some testimony from the chief tenant advocate on that as well. The bar has to be higher. Again, we want people to be safe, but I was a young man once. I've been in handcuffs, and was not the aggressor in this situation, but I've been arrested, and I know that sometimes you can be arrested without having committed a crime. And so I want us to be very careful about that, and so we can take public safety seriously without lowering the bar so low that people don't really have a fair opportunity, and nor do we want to see an increase in homelessness. A number of other, and I'll start wrapping it up because I don't want to talk too long, but there are a number of other provisions that we are working through addressing and amending in this bill. The last one I think I'll touch on is just a reconstituted public housing board. I really took an opportunity with an unfortunate, scandal or condemnation from the federal government of our public housing agency to reconstitute the board to get rid of these political people that don't have public housing experience and frankly were more there for political reasons than reasons to improve public housing. We replaced them with specific subject matter experts that were responsive to the defects that HUD said that we had. This board over the past almost 2 years has brought in a new executive team, which was very much needed. Executive team is doing really good work. This board has scrutinized the agency, but not politicized the agency. So I think they've done really good work. But this was always meant to be a temporary board. So in this legislation and my amended rental act, we are going to constitute the permanent board. And the permanent board will have, I believe, 3 residents. And they will be, 2 of them will be elected through public housing and also someone with a voucher because our public housing agency serves a lot of people with vouchers. I think I want to wrap it up there because I don't like to talk at people for too long. But is there opportunity for questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Ms. B.
I heard you at the Council of the Whole where you were talking about the Housing Fund Trust and the deputy mayor, when you questioned her, you said you wanted a yes or no answer. She said back to you, we'll have a conversation. So you had that conversation and that was what you're talking about, having a third of that housing trust fund money to maintain, because you were specific about maintaining existing houses.
Mhm.
So you had that conversation and, or,
No, we have not had that conversation. But I thought that conversation was around housing at RFK.
Oh.
But also, I've had a lot of hearings over the past 2 weeks, so I'm gonna trust your memory more than mine.
okay, and, also, in the, FY 26 budget, Triangle View, my senior building, they, about to take 76 of the 100 units and turn them into market rent, market rate, and, doing some kind of conversion to section 18 and see this and that. And it was one more thing they were gonna do, but Triangle View was specifically listed. It is public housing. It is a senior building. Nobody know what's going on about these decisions that are being made, or what they're gonna do with Triangle View.
Let me find out specifically about Triangle View. My frustration, and some of it I understand though, with public housing is over the past several years, roughly 5 or so years, there've been a lot of different promises made to a lot of different public housing communities about redevelopments and what they call repositioning. And then the director will drop the ball, and then there'll be a new director, and there are different promises, and then they had yet a new director. So what I have asked the current director is, I said, look, people live here. These are their homes, and they deserve to know what the near and midterm future is going to look like. And so I've required him to start getting clearer answers to residents. In his defense, they have submitted some proposals to HUD. HUD has not yet given them feedback. They are taking a long time, months, if not a year. Now, once they get the approval from HUD, that means they have the option. Doesn't mean they have to follow through with that. So what they're saying is, we're trying not to cause too much confusion by telling people the applications we put into HUD. We're asking HUD for permission to do certain things. Once we get the permission, then we will engage the residents and see, inform them and see what we're gonna do. So the long and short is the housing authority is in a bit of a holding pattern with respect to how they're going to improve the conditions of all their properties. But let me find out specifically about Triangle View.
Ms. Brooks, you wanted to ask that question about the recertification and raising the rents in DCHA and try.
Okay, I got it. How are you, sir?
Doing well, good to see you.
You too. There's a major concern at Triangle View and where I am, Capitol Gateway, with a lot of the senior residents. It's a senior residence building receiving notices about back rent, and they were not notified in a timely fashion. They have been getting notices on their doors and in the mail from DC Housing and from the rental office, indicating they owe over $1,600 worth of back rent. And they were not told about this maybe a few months in advance. And then when you question the rental office, the senior property manager, and ask who's responsible for increasing the rent, they will say it's DC Housing. And when you confront your housing specialist at DC Housing, they will say it's the management's responsibility. They're playing the blame game. In the meantime, the tenants are being stressed and stressed out. And we're asking for an audit request. And while they say, yes, they will do an audit, they can't tell us the completion date, but they can tell us, we expect for you to pay this back rent. We need some transparency. It's too much going on. So.
We can help here. Let us follow up with you and make sure we have all the information we need, but then we'll reach out to the housing authority and we'll say, look, if you've increased rents and are saying that people owe money for back rents and they're disputing it, then it seems only fair that you do an audit, and so that you have the information you need, and we'll work to get a timeline on that for you as well.
Okay, now I've already prepared an email to send to the office.
All right.
And I have on there, I'm CCing the housing specialist, and I'm gonna CC someone here at OTA. I just received somebody's name. Can I also say I'm CCing Councilmember Robert White?
Yes, please.
Thank you so much.
And so what I'll ask you to do is CC me and would it be you, Jaya, or somebody else?
Yeah, me's fine.
Okay,
Me and Jaya will-
I'll write, I'll give you my
I can
card.
get you the.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
We'll get her
They'll-
contact.
They'll get you. the
Ma'am, we'll
info.
get your contact info.
All right, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Good afternoon. I have,
Say your name.
a question. Oh, I'm sorry. So, I'm sorry, Joe. Sorry, my name is Venus Little. I'm the, president of the Tyler House Tenant Association, located at 1200 North Capitol Street Northwest, just up the street from here. And, I have written testimony, of the rental act that you have put in place, and I had a couple of things. One thing of Ms. Janice just spoke about, just opposing to landlords receiving rent increases, and those are one of the reasons. Conditions, violations, safety issues, security issues. I mean, I could just go on and on and on, and I put it a lot in there. I do have one thing that I heard you mention about the rental act and, I'm sorry, about the TOPA transferring, why you would like to keep it, I guess, with the tenants keeping it versus them selling the property or having them to own ownership of the property. Just let's take care of the code violations, and we do have resources that would help take care of those code violations. One I heard you mention was DOB, Department of Buildings. I have a big concern issue with DOB. Most of our government agencies, when we call out to them to try to get them to support us as renters and handling code violations. One I can say is that Tyler House, there is a lot of issues. They might not think that there are a lot of issues, but there are. One is our elevators. Our elevators break down so much that it's just unreal. The management do not fix them in a timely fashion. Sometimes they'd be out for 3, 4 months, 6 months, or what have you, and they just don't want to fix them. Supposed to be safety, secure doors. A lot of this I had put in my testimony. And reason why I say some of these buildings, the landlords does not deserve a increase. They just don't deserve an increase. With DOB, you call them out, they come out, and then they say, there's nothing. I didn't see anything. I'm getting a text back with a response saying, code wasn't found. What the heck is wrong with you? You did not see that elevator over there not working? You did not see them big giant hotels over there on the side that you can report? Everything that I report, you didn't see all that garbage sitting out back? I have a problem with DOB when we call them for code violations and they do nothing. It needs to be, I'm sorry for pointing my finger. It needs to be a follow-up with DOB. They need to have some type of enforcement with following up with the landlords when they do an inspection.
Yeah.
And these little tiny fines that these landlords are getting is nothing. It's nothing to them.
Yep.
They can wipe that away. They will pay that. Like DOB came to my unit, it's been 90 days. The landlords still have not come to make the repairs in 90 days. 90 days. They just don't care nothing about the government enforcing it. So why do they deserve an increase when you have the government telling you to do this and you still ignore it and don't do what you're supposed to do, what they have addressed for you to do? I have not had a smoke detector in my unit for 3 years. After inspection, no smoke detector. I said, why didn't you say nothing? Why should I when they doing their house, they doing their inspection? I have said something. Fire extinguishers just got taken out a month ago, the beginning of this month. Ask us, was our fire extinguishers replaced? No, they were not. No, they're not. Front doors broken. They supposed to have secure doors with key fobs. They're not there. Calling out to DOB, guess what? We still have code violations. Even if we don't exercise, if it does, you do it the way you said you would like to do it with the TOPA, guess what? And if we use DOB to, submit or support with code violations, we still gonna have code violations. It's still gonna get worse because DOB will not be the ones that's going to assist us with this. They will, but I'm just saying with those little fines, landlords, they don't care nothing about those. I don't wanna say too much because I wanna I don't wanna get in trouble, but I'm just saying that that's just one thing I just wanted to bring up that I heard. I really was supposed to sit here and just listen, but I heard you mention that about DOB, being a supporter and it's not happening.
No, I hear that. So one of the things that my team and I are gonna turn our attention to later this year is the code enforcement and violations, because these things have got to get corrected more quickly. Either the fines aren't enough or we don't do a good enough job collecting the fines. But I don't like how DOB is operating right now, because I'm hearing too many stories like this. So we will get some attention on these issues at Tyler House, but I do want you to know we're looking at enforcement, because again, too many people are reaching out to DOB about issues, and those issues aren't being fixed. And I don't know if it was you or somebody else who had a testimony suggesting that before DOB closes out a complaint, they should reconnect with the tenant who made the complaint. But that's like one of these common sense things that I think we can do that'll help some of these gaps in communication.
Because I reached out to OTA and very much well. OTA, they did their job. They brought, DOB, out to my building, and I give them their props. They got the ball rolling, but DOB just still not owning up,
Because they got to carry it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They did their part, but they just not doing their part,
Yeah. I hear you. Well, more to come on the enforcement piece, and the fines are and collection of fines are some of the things that we're looking at.
Yeah, thank you.
Look real hard.
We got a couple of questions in the chat. There's some people who have joined us virtually.
All right.
So one of them is the DC Policy Center suggests TOPA exemption between 7 to 10 years. Councilmember Nadeau's bill suggests 30 years. So where is the 15 years coming?
Appreciate the question. So I met, as I mentioned, with a lot of folks in the investment and development communities. And often sometimes I would hear like between 3 and 7 years. Sometimes I'd hear 7 to 10. The outside range was 15. Now, I don't think there's a big difference between 10 and 15, because you still have not hit the end of the useful life of most major systems. So if we're going to amend TOPA, and again, if I'm gonna go ahead and take lumps, like let's do what we need to do and not undershoot. If the goal is to get more production of housing, and I am hearing that the outside of that is 15 years, I want to hit the outside. I'm not trying to compromise for the sake of compromise. I'm trying to get something done. And I think if we looked at stats, we would see no or virtually no difference between 10 years and 15 years. So, rather than feel like we got a moral victory and, unwillingly, harm some people, let's just do what we need to do.
Okay. And then, sorry, one more from the chat as well. How many arrests and what kind of charges do you believe constitutes eviction?
how many arrests and what kind of charges. It should constitute eviction. I'm not sure how to answer that. Like, look, if you assault somebody in the building and that person is afraid, like you won't assault them again, feel like you got to get evicted. So, goal is to keep people safe, but again, just because you've been arrested does not mean that you have committed a crime. And we've got to be careful. So often with public safety, we just kind of shoot from the hip. And like, you can look in our jails and prisons and see what happens when we do that. So like, I want us to make informed decisions. And there has to be some semblance of justice, like give people, a fighting chance to get a lawyer. But I'm not trying to keep dangerous people in a building. I'm just trying to make sure we're not throwing people out, without at least having them charged. Yeah.
Wouldn't you, after,
My name
I'm
is
the
Carlos.
person who asked that hello?
Yeah.
I'm the person who asked that question. And in my building, the arrests and the charges are mostly people who are violent. And the landlord can do nothing about it. And so that's why I asked that question. We have people that have been arrested for for assaulting people. We've had people who have been arrested for guns. And I'm talking about in Chevy Chase, DC. So I want to know, like, I was told that, there was going to make it a little easier for people to be evicted if they committed crimes like that. People who
Yeah.
threaten other residents, people who beat up other residents.
So I'm not sure your name, so I apologize for not addressing you by name, but I
My name
appreciate
is
you.
Sheila Kadoff.
Sheila, I appreciate you weighing back in. So let me be clear. The mayor's bill allows for eviction when someone gets arrested, not even charged. That is the bar that's too low. So, if somebody, the examples you gave, my guess is those people are going to be arrested and charged. In which case we're probably talking the same language here. So I don't want to leave you with the feeling that we want people to engage. We want to allow people to engage in behaviors like this and not be evicted or make it harder. It is just my belief from a justice standpoint that arrest alone is not enough. Like if the courts don't even have enough to charge someone, how can we evict them? But the bar for charging people is still pretty low. So I don't think we're really on different pages. I just hope you understand why I don't believe that arrest alone is sufficient to allow for a public safety eviction.
I think there was a question back here.
Yes.
I want to make sure she concluded. So my name is Carlos Morales, and I'm at 4000 Mass Avenue Apartments, President of the Tenant Association there, and want to speak about two issues. One, piggybacking on Department of Buildings, and two, talking about notice of arrest. So notice of arrest in its general form is what the council member was talking about. But there's a new toolbox or new tool in the toolbox for landlords that's called a notice of arrest for a mental evaluation. So if the landlord says, hey, we're concerned about that person and we think they have weapons, we think they're dangerous, we think they're not on their meds properly, the police can get CRT to come in and do an involuntary mental evaluation. The police have to take that person to the hospital, and the police then will give the landlord a notice of arrest that the landlord can use in landlord-tenant court to expedite an eviction, which goes faster than, of course, the non-payment. No one talks about that because that's a secret little thing that the landlords have. Let me jump to the Department of Buildings. The Department of Buildings inspector crying to me said, I need to talk to the council member for this ward, Ward 3, because there was nothing he could do. His hands were tied. The counsel for the landlord told him he could not do an inspection in my apartment, even though he was scheduled to do an inspection. The first person that came in January to do the inspection and did the notice of infraction, there was a follow-up in April. That was canceled. So this letting the tenant know or something was supposed to, but didn't. So canceled. When I called, because I waited that day, they said, oh, you got to make another appointment if you're still having issues. I made another appointment. A week later, when that person showed up, went to the office, they gave him some fake pest control reports saying they're trying. They're really trying. For 18 months, they're really trying. And the inspector said there was nothing he could do. If he wrote it up, they would throw it out in the court.
Sorry, and then I missed why. Why did the inspector say there was nothing he could do?
The inspector didn't quite get to that with me. I was pretty confused. But when I saw his emotional state, I just dropped it and asked him, could he do something with water damage? And he says, yeah, I could do that, show me. And we went and he took care of that and wrote them up on April 17th. When he was supposed to been writing up roaches that he saw, he wrote up a ceiling leak that the landlord just covered up with paint yesterday. And Friday, they're coming to do a mold inspection. That's been prettied over. That's all. Not expecting you to do anything because this is Councilmember Furman's district. But the board or the Department of Buildings is that of the mayors. And the mayor, whether she's in allegiance with donors or tenants, residents, I don't know, but things are out of balance. That's all I have to say.
I appreciate it. Well, as things progress, if you need to call in my office, please do.
Thank you.
Can I ask a quick question? The other kinds of problems we have in the building, them not evicting, we have people who are pulling the fire alarm, vandalizing the building over and over. You call the fire department, they're setting their house on fire and they won't tell us what's happening. They've been arrested, they've been restricted to their apartment. They're supposed to leave straight out the building, but they ain't doing that. So how do you? And the office won't tell us what's happening. We have to live with this person, people in her building and Milestone. Hadn't happened in my building, but the Milestone right behind me, just pulling the fire alarm. Got everybody in the building upset. Fire department comes. They took a report, or did they, Janice? In your building, and they've been there several times. They know who this person is over and over. You keep setting up fire, and you set other people's apartments on fire. And you don't tell us what you're doing about it.
You contact OTA about this and ask what we should do here. I have to imagine there's something in the lease that would speak to this, but I.
Are these elderly tenants?
Yeah, we live in senior buildings.
Okay.
And all they would tell us is that they're working closely with the council, with their
Oh,
legal
Lord.
counsel. So, but you're not communicating with the tenants to let us know that you're
We're living
doing something.
Something. We're living in fear while you
Well,
taking
it
your.
could also be a phenomena that we are beginning to see. It's called aging in place,
Mm.
where dementia, Alzheimer's, and other mental afflictions have an impact on the life of not only that tenant, but of the other tenants in the building. So maybe there's something that the OTA can do in terms of coming out. Let's do a focus group. Let's meet together. We'll meet with them
Okay.
to sort of start talking about the new spokes that we think we can begin to implement, because we do know this is an issue that is cropping up.
Can I mention one proposal that's been mentioned is to cure the problem about due process, because the rest in charge should not be enough, is giving the landlord and tenant branch the authority, a new basis for eviction, which is analogous to the 501c, which is the court of competent jurisdiction has determined that there's a a preponderance of 50% or more
Mhm.
probability that the tenant did commit
Yeah,
the criminal act.
okay.
But what's supposed to happen is that has happened in court in some way. It doesn't say criminal conviction,
Yeah.
but LTV takes that evidence and by preponderance of the evidence determines that the Ms. Katoff's instance of, the tenant beating up
Yeah.
fellow tenants has taken place.
Yeah,
So you have more than arrest,
yeah.
more than charge. You actually have a 501c like determination
I like
at
that.
LTV.
I appreciate that.
Jeff, can I say something? Could something like,
Thanks, Joel.
what she just
How you feeling?
mentioned could be part of, written in, I guess, part of tenants', rights? As a tenant to peace and quiet and enjoyment or something? Could that something, I mean,
Well, we already have that. I mean, that's both contained in your lease and it's also part of the tenant bill of rights. But we're talking about a phenomena of, it's a phenomena of life. It's an aging process that's happening across the board and things change, people act out, and sometimes it's irrational, but very well, we need to investigate it further to determine what we can do as a community of people to change or protect that individual from himself and themselves. Because I think we're seeing more of it. We see it in our emergency housing program, when we have people in emergency housing and we put them in hotels, they move into a hotel, a strange environment. They don't know where that room is anymore. Things happen when people are living alone, they're isolated. You don't know what's happening sometimes to those individuals. And so we as a government now have to begin to look at the broader connotations of what is going on, particularly in senior properties, particularly.
When they verbally say that they're going to burn the building down and everybody in it, and they say that repeatedly.
That
And they've
there's
done it
something
several-
going on. There's something going on there. And maybe that's where adult protective services should be called. Okay? That's a resource that you have. Call
Okay.
adult protective services to come in to see if they can do an assessment. You've got the Department of Mental Behavior. They have crisis units. They can send out a crisis van and do an assessment on site to see if that individual has a mental incapacity that needs to be addressed at that point. So there are other resources other than the OTA that handle that this is their specialty. So we ask you to, let's look at what other resources we can provide for the community.
Let me do this. So your hand up and then go to you.
Councilperson White, thank you very much for being here. And thank you for Roscoe's Law, by the way, too. It's really important for a lot of us who are in the same position as you are. I want to venture, I'm an inclusionary zoning tenant, and the auditor, DC Auditor's Office issued a report, I believe last year. And I think the crux of it was needs more oversight. Well, I can say, yes, needs more oversight. My question is, as a tenant, that report surveyed one tenant, a former tenant, with a very small sample of buildings that they sampled. This is the kind of conversation where you actually find out what's happening in a building by talking to my fellow tenants and neighbors, and you get the information of what's happening on the ground. Will you commit to an oversight hearing on the inclusionary zoning program and include tenants in that? In the 2+ years that I've been in the building, I have never been contacted and asked anything by the IZ program. It's an interesting situation the tenant finds themselves in because we have two masters. We're beholden to the law. I am all for the rule of law, and that on the record, but we also sign a lease with the landlord. So we have that kind of dual responsibility there. In the trainings that we get, which are terrific through HCS and other community partners, there is nothing that tells us what the law says. It's about getting you qualified. But once you're qualified, you don't know what the parameters are, what the landlord's supposed to do, of what your rights are. You don't have any of that. So I could go on and on. I'd love to talk with your staff, but it would benefit from your committee really talking to tenants, having the kind of oversight that that report called for, because the report, yeah, well-intentioned, but it stops really far short. And the way we get the answers is to talk to people.
Let me answer quickly because I gotta run out of here in 3 minutes. So the report criticizes internal oversight, not oversight from the council. I think we have a good bit of clarity on where we need to go. If in taking on this issue legislatively, we will have a hearing if we introduce a bill, but we also will talk to some tenants before as we're drafting and understanding. So we will engage tenants in multiple
Like,
ways.
look up with your office
Yeah,
too.
please do. I appreciate it. Last question. Yes.
I'll be very quick. I'm a guest here. I'm from New York City. My name is Thomas Lopez Pierre. I manage a social impact real estate fund. We raise capital exclusively from Black accredited investors, and we invest exclusively with Black real estate entrepreneurs. In the Northeast, we're putting $1 million in about 5 cities, Philly, Baltimore. In 2 years, we want to come to DC, which is why I'm here. I'm doing the preliminary work. And I can tell you, we were told not to come here, that don't invest, that the rules are too tight, and that you would lose your investors' money. There are Black property owners here that need access to equity capital. They're being excluded from the open market from people that don't look like us. So they need lawyers, doctors, and investment bankers. Some of our investors live in the DC, Maryland, and around the country, and they would like for us to be here. I just wanted to, in support, I've never met this man before. I didn't know he was the elected official in the city. So I'm not, we have no relationship. I just want to tell you that we've already made a decision. We're not doing multifamily. So we're doing 1 to 5 units. When capital says they're not coming to your community, the choice is only for the taxpayer to then pay for the renovations. But then the elected officials have to fight between crime, healthcare, education. So your housing deteriorates. So you need capital to come in to partner with you. Social capital that doesn't want to kick out people, but people that want to return. So I wanted to say in support that his logic is 110%. I don't know the law. I don't know the rules. I'm just telling you, as an outsider, we're being told not to come here to support people that look like us. And if you just focus on the tenant issue, insurance has gone up, taxes have gone up, the water bill has gone up. These operators that are Black here do not have access to white money. And so I just want you guys to think about that if you look at Baltimore and you look at Philly, they have been abandoned, acres and acres of abandoned property. The reason DC has been well is because of its leadership and because of the federal government provides economic opportunities through jobs. But you can lose that. The city can it won't longer be Black anymore. It'll start looking overwhelmingly white over time, unless you have Black capital come in and underpin it. So I just wanted to say, thank you for your comments from someone who operates on the other side. Last thing I'll say is I live in a rent control apartment on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. I'm not a bourgeois Negro. I was born addicted to heroin. Both my parents were drug addicts. I grew up in foster home and group homes, and I went to public university. So I know what it is to be poor. I know what it is to live in the hood. I lived in Bushwick, Brooklyn, when the buildings were abandoned and on fire. So that was real. So I just wanted to say thank you for having me here.
Thank you for coming.
Right.
And sharing that.
For being with us.
Yes.
When somebody says I made a good point, that means it is.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I feel actually obligated to say.
We go up and, okay, good.
Huh?
Well, thank you. Keeps us around, yeah.
Well, the program's not over.
Everybody wants to get his.
The program's not over, but
Budget.
again, we want to thank Councilmember White
Yeah.
for spending time with us today. I think he left us with a lot of good information.
Yes.
And we know that you can always agree to disagree. No, yeah, I think he got his water. Did you get your water?
Got my water,
All right, you got your water.
And King Conquest is gonna be
Kate is
here.
gonna stay because we are gonna move to our legislative session now.
Okay.
Joel Cohen is going to come up and Kate's coming up to join us. He's now coming up to join us. Thank you again, Councilmember. Thank you. To make sure that, I hope you got information. If you didn't, make sure that we get your name and any questions that you may have. We certainly will be able to answer them. We'll follow up with answers. And thank you for talking about inclusionary zoning. We will hold a focus group on it too. Let's get it together. Because I know we do get concerns about inclusionary zoning.
Yeah, I talked about that at.
Your phone.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Communication. All right. Okay, so now Joel is going to bring to you a brief overview of some of the other legislative activities that we have been doing to make sure that you are aware of some of the issues that we are dealing with on a policy level. And Kate is going to join him. No, well, what you gotta do?
I'll do it after.
All right. Kate will join him to talk about legislation.
And we have education outreach after.
And education and outreach will be after the legislative session. We want to make sure that you are aware of the good things that are happening, especially about the Tenant Summit that's coming up in September. So with that, Joel, go ahead.
Pamela's job, if she's still here.
No, Tamla's not here right now.
Somebody in the back row's job is if my voice drops to go like this. Speak up. Mona's gonna go. So the council member gave about half of, he did a great job with the legislative update. I was gonna thank him for a law that took effect in May, which changed rent control in two ways. One is better than the other one, but they're both steps in the right direction. The abolition of the certificate of assurance, which I think this group is probably pretty familiar with, so I won't say much about it, except that it was a vehicle put in the 1985 law, which said, it basically was an attempt to stymie the council from ever expanding rent control. So what they did is they put a law in saying, council ever expands rent control, have rent control cover. Currently, unregulated units, the taxpayers would have to foot the bill to pay the landlords the difference between the rent control rate and the market rate. So you're supposed to boo and hiss at this point, but that was solved by abolition. And the other sort of real problem provision in the rent control law has been voluntary agreements. Our chief tenant advocate for years and years had a mended, don't end it approach, but it's been rife for abuse. It hasn't served the purpose.
Can you speak up, sir?
Yes, thank you. Ramona, did you do this? The mended or don't end it approach we tried for many years when Councilmember Bonds was the chairperson of the housing committee. And it never worked because ultimately the housing provider's purposes that sort of accrued over time was vastly different from the original purposes of the VA, which was when tenants and a housing provider both had skin in the game to make building condition repairs that tenants were willing to increase the rent, pay an increased rent to pay. Then there would be a 70% agreement between housing providers, 70% of the tenants. But that the fix never happened. We can never restore the VA to the original purposes. So what Director Shreve has asked for abolition. We didn't get abolition, but we got an improvement, as the council member said, of the elimination of two sort of poison pill provisions in the law, which is automatic approval and passive approval, which if somebody's really morbidly curious, I'll explain what that is, but we got rid of those. And the council member mentioned that one of the statutory purposes of the VA is to establish the rent charged. And that is the first statutory purpose of the VA. It was put in 1985. And Johanna has called it anything goes, and for any reason, rent increase. And the committee took the OTA suggestion to put the word reasonable in front of the phrase rent increase. So now it has to be for a reasonable purpose. This basically allows, there's also a theory of the case that abolition might still be needed. But first, let's give the Rental Housing Commission regulations a chance to work, because they did a good job back in 2020, just before the council put in a moratorium on voluntary agreements to make, sort of right size the VA and make it subject to reasonableness limitations. So this reform is basically sanctions the regulations that will now be given the chance to work. If it doesn't work and it's still abused and, outrageous rent increases still take place, we'll go back to the council and ask for abolition. Fair enough, Kate?
Fair enough.
So that's my thank you to the council member and the committee because they did a good job on consultation on those provisions. So we appreciate that. The only other, the pending bills that I want to mention are, since heat wave is on everybody's mind, I'm going to stay topical and just mention two measures that were recently introduced. One is Councilmember Louis George's Extreme Heat Eviction Protection Amendment Act. And that would prohibit, is introduced in March, and it would prohibit evictions on days when the temperature is predicted to rise above 95 degrees. So the eviction law already has protections against evictions happening in extreme cold. This would add an extreme heat prohibition. Councilmember Henderson introduced just last couple of weeks, the Cools Act, which is Climatizing or Overheated Living Spaces Regulation Amendment Act. And that is not it was not referred to the housing, it's referred to the committee of the whole. But what it would do is expand the time frame for air conditioning, if air conditioning is a provided service, so that it would have to be turned on for 2 weeks earlier in the spring and last through 2 weeks later. So I'm not looking at the side of the room at all, but 2 weeks later in the fall. So it would amend the property maintenance code, which the OTA has a seat on. I'm a voting member of the property maintenance code. It is something that we've asked the property maintenance tag, and then they're one of 20 technical advisory groups that advises the construction code coordinating board, and they do a every 3-year review of the construction codes, including the property maintenance code for occupied buildings, to review a model code that gets introduced every 3 years and considered by the various jurisdictions. So it's something that we can propose and have proposed through that regulatory process, but the council has now proposed legislation to do it by statute. Let's see, the current required time period for air conditioning, again, if it's a provided service, there's no right to air conditioning, but if it's a provided service, it has to be maintained and operational from October. So from May 15th, from June 1st, right? No, I'm sorry, May 15th to September 15th. And this would extend the requirements to from May 1st through October 1st. And then that would change the required heat, because some buildings are, of the type that it's either AC or heat, and you can't switch back and forth. So the required heat period would be from October 15th to May 15th to accommodate the new expanded AC requirement. So those are the two I wanted to mention. I will say that I believe the cycle for property maintenance code revisions and review of the model code is going to start soon. I'm not sure exactly when. So we want to hear from our stakeholders and advocates about recommendations to improve the property maintenance code for tenants in occupied buildings. So, Kate, do you have any other items that you want to?
No, I
Okay,
can give like a timeline of rental act if that's
that would be great.
helpful. So the rental act, which is the bill that includes most of the things that my boss was talking about, TOPA reform, eviction reform, the STAR board for DCHA and a bunch of other things. We have our markup, so the housing committee will be voting on that on July 9th. And then the full council will vote on the rental act on the same timeline that it's voting on the budget this year. So July 14th is the first vote, and then the 28th is the final vote. And aside from that, I think my boss had mentioned, just looking ahead to the fall, we've talked a lot about looking at code enforcement and fine collection and really making sure that we are doing those effectively. And then utility billing, OTA has already connected with us with some ideas, and my boss mentioned Councilmember Allen has a bill to address utility billing as well. So we're gonna focus on, I think those are the two main things that we will look at when we come back from recess.
Well, Johanna just whispered utilities to me, so. Stole my thunder.
We got you.
Good, good, good.
I'm trying to think if there's other things to say about utilities. There's some other measures floating out there. So it might spring to mind. So if there's a question about that.
You guys need to go up.
Do we have questions?
Well, I was just gonna say, there's a question in the chat that was originally for Councilmember White, but maybe it's something you could help answer too.
Maybe.
Maybe. It's for renters' rent increases yearly. They're way above market rate. What's the plan to stop these yearly rent increases that aren't justified, especially if you've been in a unit for more than 5 years?
Well, our chief tenant advocate has explicitly at the hearing on the rental act, asked the council to revisit the issue of the plus 2%, the standard annual cap for rent control units for non-elderly, non-disability tenants. So the logic being that while the council is considering reducing TOPA rights essentially for tenants, in service of affordability, a probably more direct way to address affordability would be to eliminate the plus 2%. And that was a part of legislation introduced by Councilmember Nadeau about 5 years ago, a rent control omnibus bill. Had just a couple of pieces of that were enacted, but certainly not the plus 2% elimination.
Any other questions, Nicole?
Oh, sorry. Yes, there's another question. It's what's the timing of the AC date changes? Is that in a current bill?
No.
It's in a current bill, but not a current law. So it's just been introduced. The current requirement for duration of AC in the property maintenance code, the property maintenance code is at DCMR 12G. And the current required period is May 15th through September 15th. And again, this Councilmember Henderson's bill would expand that period by 2 weeks on both sides. So the new period would be May 1st to October 1st. Does that answer that?
I believe so. Yeah. And that's, what's the bill name or number? You probably don't have the number off the top of your head, but.
Oh, I don't know off the top of my head, but it's fortunately. So it's Bill 26-285, and it's the climatizing our overheated living spaces regulation amendment act of 2025. It was not sent to the Committee on Housing, it's the Committee of the Whole. So we'll be, Johanna, are we in favor of that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Just very briefly in the property maintenance tag context, the ask wasn't to just do the expansion, it was to get the data. I think it's the Department of the Environment. The tag did, we said to the Department of the Environment, please get us the weather data for the past 5-10 years so that we can demonstrate the need for the expansion of the AC period, because we want to be data driven. Tenants do disagree with each other about whether it's too cool or too hot sometimes. But I think the most recent wave, and over the past few years, we've had more heat waves that sort of demonstrates anecdotally the need for the expansion. So I think we're pretty confident the data is going to be there to justify the increase in onset.
I have a question. Due to the overheated, the changes of the transfer of the heat to air to heat. What let me just explain it. My building and some like other buildings pay their own utilities. My building, the tenants pay their own utilities. But what has happened is that the owner has made it so that he controls when the heat and the air comes on.
Now he does. Not legally.
Right, but he's fighting us, saying that I'm gonna turn your air on when I wanna turn it on, or it doesn't turn on till, May 15th, and that's when you're gonna get it on. And there are folks with disabilities who are requesting that their air get turned on before that date, or requesting that the heat get turned on before that actually date,
Before the required.
before the required date, right? But we pay our own utilities. Our utilities is not included in our rent. So he's trying to make us a building like we are paying, our utilities are included in our rent. So he's get to control
Who is he?
the owner,
Who's the owner?
Mr. Roisman. So they won't turn our air on when we request for our air.
You have two numbers. I know you know OTA's number. and
Yeah,
I know you know DOB's number. So it's a housing code violation if that AC is not on
Right,
by
by the date certain.
by June 1st, by May 15th, sorry. I keep getting that wrong. So that's number one. And then number two is once that's documented in a housing code violation report by DOB, you have the attorneys and the case managers of OTA to, pursue remedies. And it could be a demand letter to get the service turned on. It could also be a tenant petition. So, or a reduction in services claim. So it is the
There
law.
are, you
They don't
have, you
the
have their
authority-
option.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter, whether you pay this is about turning the service on and making the AC available, whether you pay the utility, or whether the housing company pays the utility, it doesn't matter, that's immaterial. So a violation of the law should be easy to document and
so are you saying there is the violation of the law if he's not turning on when requested by the tenant?
no,
What's the violation of the law when he's not turned on by law?
by law, yeah, the tenants can't.
Yeah, we know that
certain
part.
date.
Yeah, that part we understand, but what we're saying, what the tenants are saying is before the building was renovated, we were able to control our thermostat before. But now he's made it so that he controls it,
I don't
but still
understand.
making us pay our
I think-
utilities.
I do understand, but so essentially, I hate to say it, but in order to accommodate the general needs of tenants regarding those who have AC as a provided service in their units,
Mhm.
there was for some tenants, an outlier, there was a lessening of rights. Not legal rights, but of their ability to control the temperature if they had that type of AC and heat that allowed them to turn on either one. I would imagine that would still exist in the building. I don't know why they switched that out. But more likely that control was, that raises questions. Was the heat off when the tenant had the ability to turn on the AC before the required date? Because usually in most of the, especially older buildings, it's either or. The tenant couldn't just toggle back and forth between heat and AC. So I'm not sure what the circumstance was exactly.
Our building in 95, we were able to turn on our air in the summer, turn on heat, you know what I'm saying?
But now you can't do
But
that.
now we can't do that. So if we wanted heat in the summer, we was able to turn the heat on. If we wanted, air in the winter, we was able to do that.
Understood.
But we're not able to do that now.
I think there must have been a change in the system
Yeah,
Not allowed.
yeah.
He changed it during he did that
During
during
the
the
renovation.
renovation in 2013. So when he renovated, he put in this system where we can no longer get heat in the summer if we wanted heat in the summer.
I haven't heard of that. That's new one on me.
Yeah, somebody
I don't
have to
know
look
if
at.
our attorneys know about that. They've heard that. But
I have a question. I heard DOB renovations and shutting down. My question is, in DC, can a property management company shut down a building in a way that would be considered a constructive eviction, such as padlocking the main basement door, putting a combination lock on a basement boiler room, shutting down Pepco and gas facilities? All right. So that's the first question. Can a property management company just shut down a building without DOB's consent?
No, and they cannot.
And one more thing. I mentioned something to a council member. Is the F-14 form still available in DC where, for the 120-day notice to a tenant for to renovate or, rehabilitate the property?
501F.
501F.
What's it called?
501F.
501F is in Frank?
And that's one of 10 bases to evict the tenants under the red law.
Okay.
And it's a
I just wanted
temporary- it's
to
a
make
temporary
sure
eviction
because
and alterations, and it's my former boss, Councilmember Graham, reformed that law because it's being vitally abused.
right.
And now there's a very long list of requirements and responsibilities
Mm.
that the landlord has to the tenant when that happens.
So DOB would have the final say.
No, it comes to the office of the tenant
I
advocate.
can't hear it very well.
It comes to the office of the tenant advocate. We have to review the
Mhm.
petition that's filed under the 501F to ensure that all provisions are in adherence with the law. So a property management company would have to file petition with the office of the rent administrator. Once the petition is filed, it is sent to the rent administrator and to the office of the tenant advocate. We review all 501Fs before they are approved.
And DOB does have a role, but they're called in to inspect in order to verify the need for the 501F
Exactly.
in the applications. There has to be a
After the
complete
tenant-
plan and it's subject to DOB verification.
After the tenant has been notified, they're gonna shut the building down. They made an announcement because they had an evaluation by professional contractors.
No, they can't.
But they won't mention who the contractors are or whatever. Is that,
Where are we talking about? What's the address?
huh,
The address?
of what?
The building you're talking about.
Can I come to give you that information? Because this has to do with, this is livable.
You want to give
Live.
me property.
That's fine.
It's in Ward 5, I'll say that
Okay,
much.
okay.
I'm just asking these questions because I just wanted to make
You
sure.
can turn around and talk to the supervisory attorney. She's sitting right there.
Okay.
Talk to her. Talk to Ramona Quillette. She's right there.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
I appreciate it.
We're in the 501 business. We have that
We're
statutory.
close to having to move the ball. We've got to move to the next section. Are there any more
Maybe
questions?
One more and then
Yes.
I'll give that.
I just have two quick questions. I heard y'all mention something about emergency housing. Y'all have do y'all have a number for that? And secondly, when I was upstairs talking with the lawyer, the lady with the mask on, she said she was a case manager. What
Yes.
does she do?
She's a paralegal. And
Mm,
she's working in our legal department as a case manager. The gentlemen that are sitting in the back, they are case managers, not the one to the left, but the two on the right holding up their hands. They process all intake information that comes into the office, and they can assist you with your problem-solving issues. Okay? Emergency housing is administered by and the young lady in the orange in the back, as well as the chief of staff. We run the emergency housing program for the District of Columbia when there is a fire, a building closure, or any other emergency, and a property is tenants are temporarily displaced. It is our office that puts you in hotel.
What if you're in this, renting from a landlord and they condemn the house and put you out in like a couple of weeks?
If it's closed by the authorities, then we put you in a
Okay.
hotel.
Okay, thank you.
You are a tenant.
Okay, and just call this, what number?
You
No,
can
so
call.
The temporary emergency housing program only is operated when OTA receives a message from the Department of Buildings or the fire department.
Oh,
That's how that
Oh, okay.
program is operated now.
okay,
And DOB would come and close that particular single family property.
okay.
Let's say as an example, there was no water. That's a violation of the housing code.
Okay.
DOB would come out, they would placard the building, they would notify our office, and we would then talk to the tenant as well as to the housing provider to determine the cause of the closure and determine when that problem is going to be fixed. But we would place the tenant in a hotel for 14 days.
Thank you.
Sir?
Can I piggyback off the DOB? I know they said the two options we have is the DOB and the OTA. One of the questions I kind of have is, after we go through the process, we go to the DOB, what is being done to actually, I might have missed this, to enforcement? 'Cause I have 16 different DOB investigations. They're not going anywhere. They're
Yeah.
just sitting there flat. The OTA has already given me housing for 3 weeks. It's not going anywhere because the owner. And so I just don't know really where to go from that. I have civil litigation going on with them as well, but I would think that the GOB would take some kind of action. I know a lot of times they say it's like, has something to do with the registration numbers, whether they're actually getting them sent to them or not. But isn't that the law that they have to register properly? I know
They're
that,
supposed to have a basic business license, yes, to operate.
for my landlord, they didn't have a business license or occupancy license, and they also did not have a valid exemption form up until 4/30 of 2025. They put in 2 falsified exemptions. And I caught them on that, brought that up to Lauren Pear. Sorry, I'm losing my voice today. I brought that up to Lauren Pear, and all they did was change it over, have them sign another exemption, and it has falsified information on it. So I don't understand, like, where do we go when the agencies fail?
Let me say,
I think one of the attorneys, do you see that gentleman right behind you? Have you talked to Harrison Maggie about this issue?
I think
Harrison, have you spoke to this gentleman?
I wouldn't know. I
I can go.
Gotcha.
Okay. I've definitely talked to your office. You're not able to help me with my specific issue because of it being interrelated to other agencies, I believe.
I don't know about that.
No, that's.
That's not a good answer, okay?
But also, let me just say that I believe, what's your name again?
Wade Taylor.
Mr. Taylor, so I think there is a period of time, a cooling off period in the new commission regulations that says you've flouted the requirement to register for an exemption from rent control. There's a cooling off period. I don't know if it's 90 days, but I'm pretty sure, or 60 or 120, but I'm pretty sure there is one. So that it's not much of a protection, but you should be paying the lower rent for another few months at least.
But you're not
that's
back in your
something-
unit, right?
that's- Yeah, that's
I
something that
am.
attorney
So they
advised.
actually, they shut off the power from July until December of last year. I had no electricity at all. So I lived without that until that time period, and I actually had to pay to get the electricity back on, even though it's not in my lease. I actually.
Filed a tenant petition or?
I have. I filed a tenant petition. They're in civil litigation right now. I actually just filed for an injunction to stop all evictions across the building because they have been trying to evict tenants, but they don't have, I don't believe they have the right because they don't have the proper exemption. So I think they're actually slandering people's credit by filing these eviction cases without even having the proper registration.
I'm gonna say expansion of scope, but that's an internal cue, but that's what that sounds like.
Mona, do you know his case? Do you know this case? Okay, that's,
I'll do it.
yeah, hello.
Sorry, and then I know
Dr.
there's a lot out there in specific.
No,
but-
well, we'll let you talk to her about that specifically. And do you have representation? Do you have an attorney?
I did have representation. I can't afford representation anymore, so I don't no longer have representation. I've been kind of handling it on my own, but
Well, we don't charge you to represent you, so talk to Ramona, please. Did you have a question, sir? Okay, all right. Now we're gonna have our education and outreach people come up and talk to you about the next events. Because we're running out of time and I want to thank everybody for being here. I'm not trying to rush people, but we've got a window of opportunity here from 1 to 3 and I want to get everything in.
All right, so I know you all are here to find out about the tenant summit, right? Like that's why you're here. So for those of you who don't know, we have had a tenant summit annually every year for tenants in the district, but because of COVID, we stopped for a period because, you know, things shut down. So we're now finally doing it again in person and we are so excited. So pull out your phones or your calendar, mark the date. It's going to be September 13th. So it's September 13th from, I think we said 9 to 4. And it's going to be at this building and we invite all tenants across the district to come. We are going to have panels on all kinds of tenant issues. We're going to have classes and trainings. You'll get to see your chief tenant advocate. You know, we're going to have all kinds of people here presenting on tenant issues. We'll have discussion panels where tenants can network and talk to each other as well. And we might, you know, have like giveaways and tote bags and things like that too. So we definitely encourage everyone to come. If you would like to help volunteer to help us put together this event, we need people just being ushers or helping us set up, you know, handing out t-shirts, like things like that. So if you're looking to volunteer, yep, exactly. Thank you. There's a form right in there. Please fill that out. I have an online.
Yeah.
I have an online form as well. So I will send that to everyone who is joining us virtually at the end of this. But you can sign up either by filling out the in-person form or online if you're looking to volunteer. We really appreciate any help we can get. And then the other exciting thing is we're also going to have a tenant of the year. So please nominate either yourself or a tenant that you know. I know there's some nominations that are already coming in. If you think someone is doing good work in the tenant community, nominate them. We'd love to hear about it. And we'll pick a winner and announce that person and present them award at the tenant summit. So really exciting things happening. So that's all the tenant summit information.
Well, tell them when it's due. Your nominations are due by August 1st.
Yes, by August 1st. And the form is we didn't pick up one already. And then what was the other thing I was going to? Oh, the rent registry. So there is a new website called rentregistry.dc.gov. And if you are in rent-controlled housing and you are not already registered as an elderly or a disabled tenant, we encourage you to register. They have a new online way of registering now instead of filling out a paper form. So we are holding clinics across the district to tell tenants how to do this. But this is only for rent-controlled buildings. So again, this is if your unit is subject to rent control. And if you are either a newly elderly or a newly disabled tenant. So we're holding clinics throughout the district to help tenants get registered if they aren't already and they need to be. So we had again, at the front, there was a flyer about where the clinics are going to be. But if you don't have to attend a clinic. If you know someone who needs to be registered, just call our office and we'll help them out.
So what is the rent registry for?
That's for rent-controlled tenants.
Okay.
Who, if you are in a rent-controlled unit and you are elderly or you are disabled and you're registered, you get a slightly reduced rent increase. So instead of a regular rent increase, you get it slightly reduced.
Oh,
62 years or older.
okay.
Or disabled.
And only.
Or
rent-controlled
disabled, I'm
buildings.
sorry, yes, or disabled.
So any questions about tenant summit or events or rent registry?
A rent
That's
discount.
Form
So they can get a
RAD,
rent
is that
discount.
correct?
I'm
Form-
sorry, say it again.
Is that form RAD, I believe, for the,
6, yeah, RAD 6, yeah, very good. All right, well, thank you. I hope to
How
see
would you
everyone.
know if you're in a rent control building
Is the building built prior to 1976?
prior to 1976?
Yes, ma'am.
There's no subsidies tied to it.
And no subsidy attached, thank you.
Or a small building.
For what, sir?
Small, if it's, has to be, if it's 4 units or less,
Oh.
that's not your base, but that would be another exception.
All right, so I hope to see everyone at the tenant summit. If you want to get in touch with education and outreach to schedule some sort of training for your building about tenant associations or renters' rights or anything under the sun, basically, let me know. My email is Nicole, Nicole, McEntee, that's MCENTEE, that's hard to spell, at dc.gov, G-O-V, yeah.
So nice to meet you. I am Carlos and I emailed you because my landlord was trying to have me arrested saying I was not the president. So when I reached out to your office to say, hey, can you give me anything to show that we're registered, we're with you? And you said, it's confidential. I can't share it with you.
Well, so there's not a like registration necessary for a tenant association unless you are going through TOPA. So you don't have to
I
register
TOPA.
with the city
I
unless
just
you're.
wanted something that I could share with a police officer because the form that was used to register wasn't enough. And I got the email back saying that we put you in the registry, but there was nothing like official from a registry or anything that
Yeah,
I
we don't
could
have
show
a
to
registry.
CRT or the
Well, maybe we should.
Metropolitan Police, so they're ready to get
We'll,
them.
we'll talk about that, but I just want to see if there's any other questions, comments, concerns before we end the meeting.
May I ask one more question? Just about the tenant summit. I kind of missed this earlier, sorry. I didn't know whether this was part of like the bills earlier discussed. The Clean Hands Act, I know there was some modification of that, and I know zoning is basically the big problem with development and getting it in there, so it's locked in there, so it's limited space, limited area that way. With the Clean Hands Act, it seems like a lot of these people that have a lot of bad actors, I should say, like they're able to get approval for the clean hands by LLCs. They're getting new LLCs. Is there any legislation or does the OTA take a specific stance on that about, I guess, making it more reinforced? There should be some other stuff that if you create a new LLC, the people behind it should be investigated too. It's where you say, hey, there's no taxes.
Well, but that's not the OTA. I mean, they have corporation council. There's areas in the city that address that specifically when you set up a business and you're applying for a basic business license. There are certain kinds of investigations dependent upon the type of business that you do go through. But the OTA, I mean, you can leave us with a comment or some concerns that you may have, and we can investigate it to see whether or not it has any applicability to what we do. But if not, we certainly can forward it to the right council member's office that has oversight of that particular area of responsibility.
It just seemed like it's a specific, they're a big builder. So every new building, they get a new chance to have a new
Well,
LLC.
I think your point is well taken. I mean, if you look at any articles, at least over the last few days, the number of frauds that are going on nationwide are just off the roof. And so governments do have to now spend some time. I mean, we had a judge who had called me. She was doing some solar. And a gentleman in Florida filed as her agent with our Department of Buildings, got a permit to put solar on her building when she was dealing with a company in DC who notified her about the fraud. I ended up investigating the individual, found out his basic business license in Florida, turned it over to the Department of Buildings, and they were able to shut him down. So what I'm saying is, I mean, we see all of these kinds of frauds going on nationwide, and it's just a matter of people being alert enough to say, hey, can you tell me what I should do about this? And because I was curious, I got involved, so I found out myself that here was a guy who was purporting to be somebody that he wasn't. So, I mean, yes, those kinds of things are happening nationwide. I mean, if you read about the $100,000 Mr. Jones in Pennsylvania lost, or the $500,000 Mrs. Jones lost in Florida because of fraud. I mean, it's going on real big time. Now,
If Ramona is not available after the session, do you have a second human?
oh, we have plenty of lawyers here. You can come upstairs. Our office is right up, well, we're on the 6th floor, and certainly someone can see you. Okay? Thank you all for being with us.
Thank you.